Welcome back to Holistic Healing Association. I'm Erin D'Arcy. I'm certified in embodied processing and clinical hypnosis. Today, we will be addressing trauma and relationships and how trauma can have an impact on our relationships. I have with me Dr. Jennifer, who's a clinical psychologist and specializes in relationships. Thank you so much for joining us. And can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, hello everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you, Erin, for having me on. I think it's so important to learn about trauma and how that shows up in different areas of our lives. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I usually say, therapists are people that, have to be in therapy 30 hours a week. And for me, that means I'm always learning. I always want to keep growing and continue to connect to the people around me, to the world. So, as a California native, I love being outside. I love being with animals, and I love continuing to build a life that feels good to me. And even though I'm a professional, right? I help people live lives that feel good, that connect with their bodies, that help them, meet their needs. It's still something that I'm learning. And so that's why I love being able to have conversations like this, because part of it is knowing it here, and the other part is letting it get into your body so you can actually begin practicing the things. So I'll say, as a therapist, I'm a lifelong learner, and that's what makes me love the work, is that I get to learn and grow, and I get to see people in these very sacred moments. So that's what brings me here, and I hope that our conversation on trauma and relationships can be helpful for those of us who are on this journey, continuing to learn and grow and heal.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. And here's the big question for today. How can trauma impact relationships?
Yeah, well, that is a big question. And I'm glad that we have the whole time to get into that. I'll start by describing my definition of trauma, right? And there can be, capital T trauma, which I think is often what we think about, right? You've had a car accident, you've, experienced a violent event or something. Um, Trauma and the way that we think about it can be a big event, or it can be something mundane, right? The way I describe trauma is when we experience something that feels deeply unsafe, overwhelming, or threatening, emotionally, physically, or both, right? So trauma can be you're 5 years old and you can't find your parents at the amusement park, right? It might not be that your physical safety is at risk, or it may be actually if you're a little one, but emotionally, right? What that feels like. And sometimes our mind doesn't know the difference, right? Um, a lot of people are afraid of public speaking, right? As far as we know, public speaking, right, isn't a physiological threat, but it's very socially stressful, right? And our body doesn't know the difference. So when we have these experiences where we feel deeply unsafe, right? We don't have the support that we need, or we are actually harmed, whether it's physical, emotional, or both, right? That actually leaves an impact on the body, right? An imprint on ourselves and how we experience others, or the world, right? It might be easier if it was physical, right? If someone had like a cut or a broken arm, you might understand, oh, yeah, they got hurt. Well, what we know about our emotions and our inner life, we might not see it, but it may be just as painful or more than a physical injury. And so, how does trauma impact relationships? Well, those experiences that we have shape our nervous system and can impact how we feel in the future, even when the situation is different, the circumstances are different, right? We may be with someone that is a safe person. We may be in an environment that is now healthy and safe and supportive, but that experience from before will is still present in our bodies, right? It's still, comes up, and that is what the work is when we talk about trauma and relationships, right? It's starting to get into that so we can learn what's happening inside of us and how that shows up for us and what our options are in that.
And it makes perfect sense because when we have trauma, it's like we can have scar tissue
Mhm.
and it can be poked and then we can react. And the person we're reacting to may be like, what the heck?
Mhm.
And not understand why we're responding that way.
Yeah.
However, there's always a reason. There's always an underlying reason for behaviors.
Yeah.
And if we look deep enough,
Mhm.
often it comes from a place of pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if
Something
we
I
can, sorry, go ahead.
something I always say, just going off of that, is that the feelings come from somewhere, even when we're not sure why.
Exactly. Exactly. And it doesn't always have to make sense logically. Often it can be in the body and we don't understand it ourselves, why we're responding that way. And we don't always have to understand it. It's processing their emotions and healing.
Mm.
And it's a journey and it takes time. And it's important to be compassionate and graceful and understanding with each other and ourselves as we take the journey. And how does a relationship with our parents impact all of their relationships? How does it impact our attachment styles?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to start at the beginning, right? And so again, it can something that may surprise people when they come into therapy is like, okay, why are we talking about me as a 5-year-old? Like I'm having a problem in my marriage, right? Or I'm having issues with work or with anxiety, right? But when you often ask them, right, okay, well, when did that start? Right? When is the first time you felt that anxiety? Or when is the first time you felt that sadness, right? Well, when they think about it, often they might say something like, I've always kind of felt this way, or, yeah, I was really little, or there may be some where it might be like, oh, it started when there was a change in their life, like, oh, I moved and I was in middle school, right? But when we go back, right, to the parenting, that is the first experiences that we have. Literally, especially if we're talking about biological parents, we are created in this world of our parents, and that's our world until we can grow and learn that there's difference. And so the story that we live and the one that we repeat is that the story that we first lived, right? So often in therapy, parents can get a bad rap where people are, just, oh, blame the parents, blame the mom, blame the dad, right? And it's not so much about blame, but it's understanding, right? That there were people and caretakers, and it may not even just be parents, it may be grandparents and other people in the life that formed you. And literally, when we think about babies, like the way the brain is, like the neurons being pruned, it's such a formative time to how they're going to learn the skills, the music that they listen to, everything. And so just acknowledging that context matters, right? Whether that baby felt safe, whether the parents were stressed or not stressed, right? Whether there was some kind of conflict happening in the community, right? All of these things shape how children develop, right? A baby that feels safe can go out and explore, can eat, digest well, right? Can sleep well. And when there's anxiety, there's a conflict or stress, right? That is felt by everyone. And so, how do our relationship with our parents impact our other relationships, right? Well, we're learning about the roles of family. What is a relationship? What does someone that loves you behave like? Are they there? Are they not there? Right? And so, even if we don't have words for it, if we haven't really thought about it, right, that is the unconscious kind of schema that we have that then we bring into future relationships, right? You know, people that care about you do this or they don't do that, right? And it's not a conscious thing usually, it's just a feeling, right? A feeling of, yeah, I can kind of trust people are going to be there, or I don't know. Maybe I have to do it on my own. And these are, again, it's not a choice. It's just, this is what I felt. This is what I experienced.
Exactly. And we may not even remember anything happening, anything significant happening. And but there's always a reason, and it's always held in the body because the body remembers. Even though we may not remember up here, our bodies would remember. Um, a perfect example would be my mom's dad died before he was 1 year old. So she would have been experiencing deep grief. She was very close to her father.
Mm.
And as an infant, I would have been experiencing and feeling her emotions. And that would have impacted me and possibly my attachment as well, right? When your mother, who you're in tune with deeply as an infant, is mourning a deep loss.
Yeah.
And what are different attachment styles?
So when we talk about attachment styles, we're talking about the what was coined by John Bowlby, right? He's a British psychoanalyst, and he was really interested in how children bond with their caregivers and how that affects their emotional well-being. So he studied, children that were separated from parents after World War II, and he thought that there was this innate drive for closeness for survival. And so he's the one that had that term internal working models, right? So how we kind of think about things. And he and Mary Ainsworth collaborated, and Mary Ainsworth brought research into these ideas that Bowlby had. And she developed the strange situation, which a lot of people have heard about, right? Where there is an infant around 12 to 18 months, and there's a brief separation from mom or caregiver, usually mom. And so they would see when the child is in this place, this new place, and the caregiver is gone, right? Usually there's upset. It's scary for a little one to be separated, right? There were observers. There's the baby was safe, but they didn't know, right? And so when that separation happened and the parent came back, the researchers noticed there were some patterns in the responding of the babies, right? So there three primary attachment styles came out of that. So one, the parent would come back, baby's upset, and the mom would say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm here, I'm here," and the baby's upset, but the baby kind of relax, right? Maybe can be comforted by the mother, and they called that group secure, right? So they're upset, mom comes back, they can relax, right? There was another group, right, of children when the mother came back, right? The child would kind of avoid or ignore the caregiver, right? It seemed that maybe like they were upset, right? They're kind of doing their own thing, or they're just not really leaning into that comfort. And so they called that group more avoidant, right? So again, the mom is there, the child was upset, but they're not really able to be kind of comforted or going to that. And there was another group, it's called ambivalent resistant, right? And this is one where the child is distressed, the parent comes back, the child maybe wants to be soothed, they're kind of reaching, but then also they kind of don't want it. And so there's like this push and pull that happens, right? And so that is what we know as anxious attachment, right? And so in these three responses, we see this experience of these, babies again early on, where it's a secure feeling, right? I trust you'll be there, safe, right? I can trust you'll be there. I can accept that, right? This more, I'll handle it on my own, right? This fear, right? That you're not going to be there, right? Avoidant, right? And then this kind of anxious feeling, right? This unsure feeling, this please don't leave, right? Which is more anxious. And it's this fear of being left, but also difficulty actually kind of connecting, right? And so later that was expanded by Mary Main, Philip Shaver, and Cindy Hazan. And they kind of noticed that these same patterns are in romantic relationships, right? And they added a fourth category, which is disorganized attachment. And so that can be that you kind of go back between not wanting, kind of pushing away, and also having times where you are feeling very unsure and maybe clinging or needing more feedback. And so that can often be associated with fear or trauma as well, right? Where there's even more intense experiences there. And so when we look at these attachment styles, right, that helps us understand how people might respond in certain contexts, right? Like internally being able to kind of relax a little bit more in relationships, or internally feeling more worried, like unsure if people are going to be there, or internally feeling more comfortable kind of handling things on their own, right? And when I talk about attachment style, I think it's important to really notice that, people are not boxes, right? We can't check a box like, which one are you, right? But
Exactly.
we may kind of, gravitate more towards one, and it can change, right? There may be certain relationships or experiences where you may feel more anxious and kind of feel more clingy, or like need more feedback. And there may be some situations where you're kind of not as interested, right? And so just viewing this as a spectrum, right? And something that can change, but also something that is very deep in us based on those early experiences, right? This is our first experience of what we learn about the world, right? When a child never knows if their needs are going to be met, right? There's this insecurity that is picked up. And part of how I think about it as a psychologist is just developmentally, we learn and we grow. And developmental psychologists as well talk about the different stages of development, right? And when you don't have a sense of, you're going to have support, you're going to have what you need, you internalize that. And so that can actually be really helpful if you're in an unsafe environment, right? If you're in an environment where your needs aren't met, then yeah, you better be on edge, take the steps, don't rely on anyone, right? And that actually can help you survive those environments, right?
Because it is survival behavior,
Exactly.
even
And
if we're not consciously doing it.
yeah, well, it's actually something I say about, these adaptations that maybe not as helpful in the present, is that they came out of a time when they were, right? And so to really see that these behaviors come out of a need to survive, and a changing and adapting to the environment. And so you may learn to do things on your own because maybe parents were really anxious, or they had a lot of stress going on, right? And so there might be this idea of I'll handle it on my own, and that can be really helpful. Again, there's no right or wrong attachment style. It's just what kind of relationships do you want to have, right? And so that can be really helpful. I'll handle it on my own when you're young, but when you're an adult and you want to have close friendships and close relationships, right? There's kind of like a disconnect. And so that's when people say, huh, why do I do this? And so being able to understand with compassion that we had certain experiences in the past, and we also didn't have certain experiences in the past. And that shapes how we experience relationships. And so that's kind of how all that started. And I think it's a very popular idea. There's more to it, right? Temperament, culture, family, history, right? All of these things get passed down, right? If you're in a family that had a significant loss, you shared about what happened in your family, right?
Yes.
At 1 year old, you don't know, but you could feel that, right? And the
Yes.
grief and loss, and my experience is, again, families typically do the best they can, and things happen, right?
Mhm.
So even our own,
Exactly.
yeah, even our own parents are parented, and they are, receiving an emotional inheritance as well.
And do genetics play a role in attachments?
I believe I'm using the word temperament, but genetics as well, right?
Yes.
Body, heart, right? Brain. The brain is part of the body, right? All of that shows up, right? If there's a baby that is more, the nervous system is maybe a bit more responsive,
Mhm.
right? They may need some different kind of holding and support, right? And depending on the capacity of the parent, that may or may not happen, right? And so again,
Exactly.
it's not it everyone has unique needs, and what we're learning as little ones, and what we internalize, is, can my needs be met? Am I too much? Is the world safe? Right? And that then becomes this unspoken feeling as adults, right? Even as we're going along the world, right? Are we going to be safe as adults? Can I handle the challenges that come my way? That's actually what we're learning as we develop, right? This sense of hope, this sense of trust, right? And when we don't get that, that leads to right? These difficulties that we experience inside, right? This sense of like the world isn't okay. And certainly there are threats and there can be dangers, but generally, when you step outside the house, are you going to be okay? Right. So that can be a way to kind of notice our internal world. It's just like, oh, how do I think about things? Like when I wake up in the morning, am I like worried that I'm not going to do okay? Am I like, moving away from my emotions? How engaged am I feeling? How open am I feeling? How safe am I feeling? Right. And these may not be questions that we always ask ourselves, but it's kind of tuning into this part of our experience.
And to explore and be curious and
Mhm.
start to ask ourselves these questions.
Yeah.
And if we start to ask ourselves these questions, we start to understand ourselves better and our relationships better and why we do what we do, right?
Yeah.
And we were discussing when was the first remembering that we're calling a time, maybe when did I feel this as a child?
Mhm.
Because we may be projecting it on other people, our emotions, but it may come from our childhood. That's quite often.
Yeah. Um,
And how do different cultures around the world view attachment styles?
Well, there has been research done in several different countries, and these responses that were found by these researchers, as I mentioned, have been found to be universal, right? This tendency to be secure, insecure, avoidant, or disorganized, right? But depending on the culture and what is valued in that culture, we might kind of label those a little bit differently, right? So in a maybe Western culture where independence is more valued, a baby being more independent might be seen as more secure rather than avoidant, right? And I saw an example where if maybe in Japanese culture, right, where it's more encouraged to be closer to the mother, right, that might be seen more as avoidant rather than secure. So again, the same kind of behavior depending on what the culture values maybe seen slightly, right?
That makes
Slightly,
sense.
and that can, again, that's why I said it's not wrong or right to be this way. Either way, to need a lot of feedback or to want to get more feedback in relationships, to want to have more autonomy, right? Because the reality is that in a secure relationship, you have both. You need both connection and feedback and closeness, and you need space, right? I often talk about relationships as a dance, right? And so if you're just like this, it's hard to dance like this, but if you're in two rooms, it's not really a dance. When you're kind of at a distance, right, then you can actually try some different things, right? You're collaborating on something, but you can also enjoy the movement in your own body. And so as we talk about attachment style, it really comes down to what do we want our relationships to be like, right? How do we want to feel? And there is a need for both connection and a need to be our individual selves as well, and to feel okay with the balance that we have in that. And again, that's where the idea of secure comes from, right? I can have what I need. My needs will be met. You're going to be there. You're going to be okay. It's that kind of a sense.
Exactly. And you don't want to be one extreme to the other, right? Is in a relationship, you want some space and then you can come back and appreciate each other. And you also don't want to be too far out. I know my parents, I asked them before coming on today for advice, marriage advice. They have been married, happily married for 48 years.
Mm.
And every year has been a good one, has been a happy marriage. And the best advices I've ever been given in my life was go to the people who have what you want.
Mm.
So if you want to be a great somatic practitioner, go to Peter Levine. If you want to be a firefighter, you go to a firefighter. So I went to my parents today and I asked them for marriage advice. And they made a big long list. I'm just going to name a few things today. Respect each other. Even when you're angry, it's so important to show that respect. Cherish each other and be kind to each other's families. they are best friends. Just from an observer, from looking on, I can tell you they've been married for 48 years. Not once have they ever called each other a name.
Mhm.
To me, that is respect. They said support and be kind to each other's families.
Mhm.
Um, we had my mom's sister come and live with us who had Down syndrome for over 9 years. My dad treated her amazingly. We also had two of my dad's nephews come and live with us. My mom was in full support. So it's really important when you get married that family becomes your family, and to show them that love and compassion and support. Um, and my parents still date. They're in their early 70s and they still date. They love to spend time, they love to spend alone time together. These are all things I've observed. My dad and my mother have been each other's greatest support. And we all need support, especially at times when we're experiencing trauma. And so supporting your spouse, I believe, is significant. But these are just a few things that I've observed and I've heard them tell me.
Mhm. Well, congratulations to your parents. Almost half a century.
Yes.
Um, yeah,
Mhm.
and I think um, that idea of going to people that know is really crucial because we are social and relational beings. And so the way that we learn is not just through thinking, but through seeing. And we have mirror neurons that when we're watching someone eat something, those can light up in us, right? We're not eating it, we're kind of experiencing like, what would it feel like to eat that cheesecake or lasagna or whatever that fruit. And that is how we grow. And so I know there was a kind of a question later that we talked about in terms of what do you do if you haven't had good models, right, of a healthy attachment? And I think that that's the answer to that question, right? Is going to people, going to examples of what is secure, right? Of
Mhm.
does feel easy and open because
And
that,
what is healthy?
yeah.
And because different situations will arise in relationships, and they maybe even have a mentor
Mhm,
or a guide that you can really trust and lean on and go
mhm.
to help you learn and create your own healthy map for
Yeah,
your family.
yeah, yeah. And just acknowledging that what happened in the past is important and it's an important part and it's a part because the present is just as important, right, for our growth and our healing. And so
Exactly.
we can continue to take in and have corrective experiences, new experiences that feel different, so we can internalize that, take in those experiences as well.
Because your past doesn't define you. Your choices that you make today, they are the choices that define you.
Mhm.
And how does dissociation and emotional numbness impact relationships?
Yeah. Well, I think that's an important question, right? When we talk about dissociation, there is this disconnect happening, right, from your experience, your body, reality, right? And so I would describe dissociation as a response that we may have of trying to get away without being able to get away, right? That kind of when we're presented with something that is so disturbing or overwhelming that, again, it feels like a threat, whether it might be an actual threat to your life or it's emotionally threatening. We naturally want to get back to that safety. So you fight, flight, freeze, right? You fight against it, you freeze and hope it ends, right? Or you flee, you get away. But when there are circumstances, especially in childhood, a child can't, get up and leave the home oftentimes, right? So that feeling may be so much that there's this kind of sense of disconnecting from it, right?
Mhm.
So again, that can be helpful in the moment because it is too much, right? And a child, and at that time in your life, you may not have the support. And so disconnecting actually helps you get through it because you're able to kind of not be overwhelmed, not be emotionally flooded, and you move on, right? But that those feelings are still there, right? And that's why it's so important when you are safe to be able to go back and process that stuff. It's like shoving things in the closet. It's not exactly the same, but those experiences are there and they're not processed, right? You haven't had time to open them up and kind of close the stress cycle there, right? So you kind of have all these things you're carrying. And so part of the work is often just even talking about it, right? Oh, hey, this happened, and that was kind of weird, and oh, actually, that was kind of scary, and or that made me feel this, and you start putting the pieces together, and having that awareness can make a big difference because your body will still have that response, right? Oh, I'm pulling away, or oh, I feel overwhelmed. However, you experience that, but now you have the knowledge. Oh, okay, this was like when I was a kid and my dad yelled at me, right?
And this is why it's happening.
Yeah. And so then you're like, oh, and then you can have that experience. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is the feeling, but actually I'm with my partner, I'm with my friend, I'm at work, like I'm good. I actually can flee. Like I can leave here if I need. I can stand up for myself. I actually am safe. So you put that together, right? And often with dissociation, what I find is it's this learned response. And so first off, noticing what's happening and why and understanding it. And as you do that, right, you can try to start working on, coming back to your body, right? And so often it's just finding a small thing, right? Can you feel your fingers a little bit, right? Is there something that helps you feel connected to yourself, right? Is there like a picture, an image, a word, something that feels deeply true to who you are, and that sometimes can help tune you back in, right? And sometimes it's okay just to allow yourself the time as well, right? Your question was, what is dissociation? How does it impact relationships? And the reality is if we're cut off from our emotions, if we're not connected to ourselves, it's really hard to connect to someone else. And so then our partner may have this experience of where are you? Right? Maybe you're physically there, but you're not emotionally there. Right. And it doesn't have to be to the level of dissociation. That can be a little bit of avoidance too, right? I'm here and I want to be close to you. I want to be connected to you. But if we haven't learned to be with our own experience and feelings, right, we may not be able to go to this place where that, intimate, close place where our partner wants to meet us, right, to really be able to open up. And so when we're having trouble accessing certain parts of ourselves, and those are not going to be as accessible to other people either. And that's kind of the challenge in relationships, right? Is that we are individual and separate, but we get really close. And actually we have a relationship, which it has a life of its own in some ways, right? And so that relationships are the place that will reflect back all of those areas to us, right? Isn't it wonderful?
Mhm. Yes, no, it's true. And if we are not feeling our own emotions, how can we expect to understand other people's emotions and understand when our spouse or anyone else we're in a relationship with is feeling sad or angry, and to truly be in connection with that and be able to respond in a connected way.
Yeah. And the reality is, if we also become so overwhelmed by our emotions that they just kind of go everywhere, right? It's also hard to have a healthy
Exactly.
connection because then we also can take that on our partner, right? You did this to me. You made me feel these feelings, right? And certainly something your partner does or doesn't do may trigger something in you, but then those are your feelings, right?
Mhm.
You were late and that really bothered me, right? Okay, but what are your feelings about it? Oh, I feel like I'm not important. And that's how I felt in my family. And so you can process that and you realize and you can talk about that, right? And you might be able to get curious about your partner. Well, what happened for you? Oh, you were trying to finish something at work or with someone else, and you were, worried about that. And so, how our different experiences can kind of conflict, right? And it's not that we can't be connected, it's that instead of doing this, we have to do this. Right? We have to open first to ourselves to say, yeah, I don't like it when this happened, right? this comes up for me. I feel that sadness. I feel that sense of, betrayal. I feel that sense of, I'm losing myself, right? Everyone has their own tender parts, but the more aware you are of that, the more aware you are for the people that you love, the more, there can be less kind of like conflict, and hopefully it's more reaching close. Right. And so when we're aware of that and we can feel our feelings, right? Oh, I'm disappointed. I feel sad. I can feel that. I don't need to get rid of it. Then we're not fighting with those feelings, and we're not fighting with our partner for causing those feelings. And that's really hard, right? Even as a psychologist, as a therapist, professional, I would say when I work with kids feelings helper, you know, I have a hard time with the big feelings, the bad feelings as well, right? I know that we're human, we're going to feel sad, disappointed, angry, but I still don't like feeling them. And so often a lot of the time it's even sitting again, just allowing yourself to sit with that, right? I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm lonely. Is that okay? Right? And not just moving from that. And that's what I'm talking about when I mean a secure relationship with ourselves, right? That we're not feeling so like frenetic in our emotions that we have to change the outside to make ourselves feel better. That's kind of an anxious attachment, right? And we don't feel so overwhelmed that we push away from experiences and parts of ourselves to not have to deal with that, like more avoidant, right? That we can kind of sit with these feelings and we know they're not gonna break us.
Exactly. And that can be scary to start to feel our emotions, and we can do behaviors. For example, even going on social media or watching TV. It can be as simple as that, or having an app to turn off the emotions we don't want to feel. And all emotions, none of them are bad, none of them are good. Well, they're good because they send us messages,
Yes.
but they're neutral,
Yes.
right? And a lot of our emotions come from our past. Um, and if we can learn to sit with our emotions, we can learn to sit with other people's emotions, but we need to be able to learn how to sit with our own emotions first.
Yeah.
And in relationships, we can be hurt in relationships, but we can also heal in relationships. And often in relationships, there can be small ruptures. However, in the repair, there can be healing, and there can be learning, and there can be growth.
Yeah. Well, I'll add to that, right? Is that you said it exactly, right? We need to be able to sit with this experience that we're having, this experience of being human, right? And the reality is that ideally we can learn that as little ones, right? And that's, Winnicott would, like he was a pediatrician and he talked about this idea of the good enough mother and having like a holding environment where the mother's consistent care and sense of security helps the baby know that, right, their world is safe, right? And so here's where we see the need for children to test their environment, right? This is where we learn about feelings, if feelings are okay, right? Healthy aggression can be a test of the environment because you know that things can withstand your emotions, right? If you get mad at your mom, there's like a toddler again, and it just the toddler wants the cookie and the mom says no, and the toddler's tired, right? And so the toddler throws himself on the ground and hits the mom and kicks their feet, right? If the mom can make it through this, right? If she can handle her emotion and be there, right? She's not at risk of being hurt, but it's really difficult to be in the face of these strong emotions. But for her to stay engaged, right? The
Exactly.
baby learns like, I'm okay, right? I felt so angry. I said, I hate mommy. And she was like, I see you're upset and I'm here and I'll be here until you feel better. Right. And
Exactly.
the baby learns that this sense of, okay, anger, I can feel angry. Right. And in parenting, we're helping our little ones to be able to handle these experiences that are very overwhelming. Well, even when we think of our own anger, right? Our own anger might be a volcano, but as adults, hopefully we've learned to kind of hold that, right? but also oftentimes people, especially women, especially people in vulnerable groups, right, to have to push that away when anger is really important, right? It tells you when something doesn't feel good, when something doesn't feel just, right? But how we express that is directly connected to the experiences we have, right? If we're angry and we're sent away, right? When you are feeling better, you can come back, right? If we are angry, if we are mocked, yelled at, right? What are you crying about? Or what, stop being angry, right? What does that, how do we internalize that? And so again, often parents, as great intentions as they could have, a mom that's really anxious, no, no, don't cry. It's okay, right? A child is, oh, I have to put my feelings away, right? And
Mhm.
so that's what we learn in our families. And again, often families carry a lot of anxiety. And so we carry some of that too. I can't just be mad that something happened. I have to put it away, right? But it becomes a really healing experience when you can have relationships. You can say, I'm mad at you. You said you would do this and you didn't. And that person can say, yeah, I'm sorry. I that is true. Right. And I apologize. I didn't want to hurt you and I did. Right. And to just be able to feel that, right? And that doesn't mean the relationship's over. That doesn't mean that person's terrible or you're terrible. It's a feeling. And as you said, there's wisdom in that because then you can address that pain and it can be healed rather than pushed away, banished.
Exactly. And it's so important that we can teach our children so that they can feel safe with any emotion that comes up. I know another example, and I often do this with my daughter. She's 3.
Mm-hmm.
Today we went to Afghan's Line Safari, and it's closing for the season. This is the last week. It's the last day we're going, and I informed her about this. On the way out, she was crying. We had a season's pass. We were in every other week, and she was crying
Yeah.
because she knew it was over for the season. And I told her it's okay to feel sad. Mommy feels sad sometimes too, and it's okay to cry. Just allow it. And if we can allow it, then our children can feel safe. And that's with any emotion that comes up.
Yeah.
And for ourselves, when our own emotions come up and we may be triggered, if we can have the courage to look and face our triggers are talking to us.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where how we can start to heal because these are messages and listen to what the trigger is telling you. And then we can start to process our emotions and start to heal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how can we start to take down the emotional wall and start to open up and trust people? Because when we have trauma, this can be at times very difficult.
Yeah. Well, I think the example you're giving is really beautiful of listening to those feelings and seeing what it is it's connected to. And often it is a pain or an unmet need, right? So if you're in the present and someone's crying and you're uncomfortable, right? Or you're saying, no, I can't cry. Well, why can't you cry? Right. And it goes back, well, I was told don't cry, or, in my family, I never saw them cry, right? Everyone just said, just move on, or you'll be fine, or. And so there's actually a part of you that needs to feel it, that needs to cry, right? And just to have that space, right? And that was something you didn't have then, that you can do now, you can have now if you need it, right? And so again, when we talk about something like an emotional wall, right, that's a very strong barrier, right? For some people, they may need that, right? There may have been people in their life or situations that were not safe. And so absolutely not, you cannot come in. That can be helpful, right? But the boundaries that can be most helpful are often flexible, right? But it depends on the situation, right? If there's a situation that has happened over and over again, and you've tried everything that you can do and it hasn't changed, maybe a wall is appropriate, right? But if you have a wall, that doesn't leave a lot of space for good things to come in if you want them to, right? If there's someone in your life where maybe it's a difficult relationship, but there are aspects of that that you enjoy, then having a little bit more flexibility and openness to allow some aspects of that while, you know, holding back others, right? That can be the work. And for many of us, we kind of go to extremes, right? Like either I can accept it the way it is, I'm in this role, it's uncomfortable, it feels bad, but like this is the way it is, or like I'm going to cut off from it, right? And the reality is that there's all of these options in between, right? And so what we can learn as we get older is that we have choices, right? And other people may not like that. Other people may not like the choice that we make to go, to not go, how much we're willing to engage, but we're not responsible for their feelings, right? And if they're going to engage in ways that, you know, don't feel good, don't work towards the relationship that we want, we can respond accordingly, right? And also, this is how we can grow relationships. How we show up helps people know how to treat us, right? So if
Exactly.
so when we are listening to our feelings and responding authentically, right? When there's a friendship, a relationship that feels really wonderful and warm and good, and we can verbalize that and say, "Hey, I like this. I appreciate you," or "Thank you for listening," right? And we might notice that and say, "I want to spend more time with that person." Right? And there may be another friend, again, everyone's different, but maybe this person doesn't really listen well or doesn't ask questions or maybe they're not meeting you the ways that you need, and maybe you've kind of tried talking about it and it hasn't really led to anything. And so that may still be a relationship you want to have in your life, but maybe you're not spending as much time, or you're not spending times where you're feeling more drained or vulnerable, right? So there's an awareness of you have choices, right? You can allow someone to be really close, right, in your home. You can meet someone outside a little bit farther away, right? And it's this awareness of we are allowed to have our own experience. We can understand that experience and we can make choices that takes that into account, right? We no longer have to just, push through, right, and make it work. And again, when we're talking about families, there can be a lot of love in a family. It can be a very difficult environment because of one person, two people dynamics, for many reasons. And so part of learning about relationships is being able to learn about our own needs and how to balance that, right? Being close to the people we want to be close to while also being aware of how that can be at a cost and impact us as well.
Yes, exactly. And why remarry the person who would trigger us?
hmm That's a good question. And there's a quote I really like from Terry Real, who's a couples therapist, and he says, "We marry our unfinished business." Right. And so going back to that example of the baby throwing the tantrum with the mom, right? That baby needed to know that it can feel upset, it can be angry, and mom is going to be there and be safe, right? And so there is this sense of we need that. We need to know, like, I'm going to be loved. I'm not going to be left. I'm special. I'm chosen, right? And that's the need for connection. Everyone has that, right? And so we spend our lives, right, first as little ones, but also then later in romantic relationships, right, trying to experience this, right? Can I be loved? Right? And again, that definition and what we're looking for may look very different depending on each person, but that same sense of can I feel chosen and safe in a relationship, right? And so we look for this, and based on our experience, right? If we grew up in a family where everyone kind of did their own thing and they weren't very close, that becomes your experience, right? You kind of do things together naturally or do things on your own naturally. So if you meet someone and they maybe want to be a little bit closer, that might feel like, whoa, that's kind of weird. What do you
Mhm.
mean you want to like talk every day, right? That's I like to just have my space, right? And so it's not wrong or right either way, but that's just what that person is is familiar with, or the opposite way, right? When we grow up in a family where there's a lot of instability, right? There's not consistency, then those feelings come into your present relationships where you don't know if you can trust people. How are things going to work out? And it becomes more about you than that person, right? Are they going to choose me and that means I'm good, rather than is this a good partner for me, right? Because I already know that I'm good, and I'm seeing if this is someone that really is a good match that is worth me investing time and energy into, right? But we're not always aware of these feelings, especially in the early days of dating. You just kind of meet someone and like, man, they're really great, or there's just something about them, right? But often the something about them is they feel kind of familiar. They might be like your family, right? They might have some of these same tendencies that you're aware of, and that feels really good, right? Oh yeah, they initiate a lot, they plan everything, it feels so great for me, but then you realize they're like your mom who just they took over everything, right?
Yes.
And you in some ways, again, that traits are not good or bad. It's just how it sits with you. And so the same things that draw us into a relationship, like, man, yeah, they take over everything. I don't have to do anything, then can become the issue later on when we're in these rigid roles that don't work for us, right? So the invitation in relationships is to pick people. Everyone's human and has stuff, but to be aware of your stuff. Hopefully
Mhm.
they're aware of their stuff and to be able to work on it, right? So I think that's the unconscious dream is we find someone, they're sort of like, someone in your life, right? Maybe, the men in your life were not consistent or they weren't loving. And so you pick someone who's a man who's maybe not as emotionally warm, or maybe you do pick someone who's warm. But either way, you're going to be disappointed. And so it's dealing with the disappointment that this is a human person, right? And the idea is that this time the story can be different, right? This man who maybe is emotionally cold, like someone in one of our caregivers was cold, now actually can be warm. And so there's this idea that the story can end differently, right? And hopefully, if you pick a partner who's doing their work, right, not perfect, but working on things, there can be a different story, right?
And
But
that's really important, is to
yeah,
pick a person who is doing their work, because everyone has stuff.
yeah. And the reality is the story is written by both of you. So it needs to be you doing your work, which is like, oh,
Exactly.
I'm realizing that in my mind, if you do this, then that means we're going to be okay. But actually, you know, planning a vacation doesn't mean you're going to be happy, right? So we have these different like tests that we might do, especially more anxious attachment, to kind of feel that security. But the only way to really build a secure relationship is to build it, right? Through time, experiences, communication, repair, right? All relationships are going to have different conflicts and different misses, right? But what makes a relationship good is you find each other again, right? You were leaving in the morning in a rushed way, and someone's going to work, and you're going here, and you said, "Oh, I had this dream, and it was really scary," and your partner didn't hear you, and but that actually meant something, and then you can circle back when it's more quiet, right? And there's not, the thousand things distracting you. You can say, "Hey, I was telling you about my dream this morning and you didn't hear me." And you're okay, a partner that is attuned and triangles. Oh, I had no idea. Right. Yeah. I'm sorry. Tell me about it.
Mhm.
Right. You find each other. Right.
Exactly. That repair happens,
Mhm.
because it's even often it's little things,
Mhm.
but little things can add up
Yeah.
to a mountain.
Yeah.
And we need to be constantly doing little things
Mhm.
that are positive
Yeah.
to build healthy relationships. And what advice do you have for everyone today is if they do get triggered in a relationship, what advice can you give them to handle that?
Well, what I'll say is what we've been talking about, which is you will be triggered in relationships because you're human, and leaning into that and understanding what that is because that's part of you. And so again, not viewing these emotional triggers as like bad things, but viewing them as a part of what it is to be alive, right? If we were talking about sports, and we're like training for something, if I notice like, oh, my turning is like kind of not what I want it to be, or my speed isn't right. You're noticing these aspects about yourself. You can say, okay, hey, maybe I'll do this different. Or maybe you just notice like, yeah, maybe I'm not a sprinter and I just need to do like this kind of running. And that's how we know ourselves, right? It's okay to have feelings and to have needs. There's nothing wrong with that, right? It's not about fixing things all the time. It's about living, right? Living and being able to live a life that feels good to you, being able to have relationships that feel good. And nothing feels good all the time, but generally, right? Feeling safe, feeling happy. And when you have those triggers, right, to really sit with that, right? Is this something that I need something from myself? Right? I always say especially when it comes to conflict and communication, I really love the acronym HALT, right? Before you have serious conversations, HALT. Are you hungry, angry, lonely, tired, right? Sometimes a trigger may be you need to eat a sandwich, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes the trigger is you didn't sleep the last couple of days, so you haven't been getting good sleep, and it just feels like the end of the world, right? But our bodies feel our emotions as well. So sometimes a glass of water, a walk, a snack, right, a breath, things may feel a little bit more balanced even with that, right? And if it's not, right, there's a real pain there, right? Tuning into that, oh, I'm scared, or I felt overwhelmed, right? And when you can be aware of that, you can do something with it, right? And you can say, oh, okay, I need to change something about my schedule, or I need to do something about my lifestyle, or I need to work on something in this relationship together, right? And that actually is a great thing because now we can keep building lives that actually serve us better, right? And so really I would love to invite people to see triggers as a way to grow, right? And in the past, a trigger may be very painful because it never gets addressed. There's no time and space for it. It's just an inconvenience to those around, maybe. But when you actually can value you and give yourself space, a trigger is an opportunity, right? To
Yes,
to to heal, right? And to
exactly. It's an opportunity to heal. Why do women that were abused as children grow up and get into abusive relationships?
That's an important question, right? And I'll say both women and men, right, that experience both abuse or witness domestic violence, right? Any kind of physical discipline or violence. There's a large body of research that shows that experiencing physical discipline or witnessing domestic violence in childhood increases the risk of both later victimization and perpetration of violence in relationships, right? And this is why psychologists, healers really discourage physical punishment. That's not encouraged, right? So it have to be the level of quote abuse, but when we see something around us that becomes normalized, right? So I often have conversations with parents who, again, there can be cultural reasons why physical discipline is used. And I ask them, right, okay, this is how you're choosing to discipline your child, right? There are specific parameters in what is acceptable and still not encouraged, but also what is abuse. And do you want your child to learn that people who love you are going to hurt you?
Mhm.
Is that a lesson that you want? And often parents that are engaged in this behavior have experienced physical discipline themselves. And there's these ideas of, well, the world is harsh, so I have to like help them be ready for the world, right? So what I often ask those parents is the world may have a lot of different things. What do you want them to learn about your home? Right? What do you want them to learn about your relationship? Right. And whether we mean to or not, right? If we're teaching, telling our kids that we're teaching them by hitting them, right? That becomes normal, right? And it's a stark contrast. And there's a book by Bell Hooks all about love where she talks a lot about this idea of physical discipline, right? If it's not okay for a mom to hit a dad to teach him, or for a dad to hit a mom to teach
Mhm.
her, why is it okay to hit kids,
Mhm.
right? So even though there's a different standard, I know that one brings up a lot. Um, we when we see this, right, anyone committing violence against someone else, then again that becomes part of what is normal, right? Or even if we don't want it to be, right? So again, this idea of familiarity drawing us in, it feels comfortable even when it actually doesn't feel good, right? It may
Mhm.
be familiar for someone to have a temper, right? Oh, they're very very volatile and passionate, right? That feels great, but actually they're not regulating their emotions and they're going everywhere. So at times, yes, it's wonderful someone can feel deeply, but when that gets put on you and you're blamed, that doesn't feel good, right? So when you have been a victim of domestic abuse or any kind of physical violence, it's really important to be able to heal that for yourself, right? To know that it is never okay for anyone to harm you, right? Physically or emotionally. There's actually a quote by Bell Hooks that I love that says, all too often, women believe it is a sign of commitment, an expression of love, to endure unkindness or cruelty, to forgive and forget. In actuality, when we love rightly, we know that the healthy, loving response to cruelty and abuse is putting ourselves out of harm's way.
Mhm.
And that's what we can learn is that it we should have learned that as kids, right? No, no one can hurt you, right? You go to your parents if someone's hurting you, they will protect you. And as an adult, you can protect you. So when someone's treating you in a way that doesn't feel good, you are allowed to say no. You are allowed to put yourself out of that situation. And that's actually love because love will put you out of harm's way because you deserve to be safe and not hurt. And also that person that, again, everyone has things that they're working on, but that doesn't mean they get to take it out on you.
I
Or,
know love will protect you.
yes.
I'm allowed to share. I have a friend of mine that he grew up in a very abusive home, and he told the teacher that he was being hit just once. And his parents said, if you ever tell again, they will take you away from us. And the abuse continued. Severe developmental trauma as an adult. It's not right. It's not fair. And as parents, the world has a lot thrown at our kids already. One thing we should be able to control is the home environment. And we need to reflect on what type of home environment do we want for our children, because it will impact them the rest of their life, and it will impact their relationships, and it will impact your grandchildren. So it's significant to do deep reflection, and myself included, on what type of home do we want for our children and how can we make it happen. And even healthy couples fight. What's the difference?
I think this connects really well with what you're sharing about, which is part of being in a healthy relationship is that you can be reflective, you can grow, you can change. And so in healthy conflict, one, I think a necessary element is for there to be, you said respect earlier. I like to use the word kindness, right? I may be so mad at you, but I'm still going to treat you well
Hmm,
because that is what care is, right?
exactly.
When we are not acting caring, right? The word cruel, right? I'm upset, so I'm going to hurt you, right? That's not love, and that's not okay. And punishment, again, you can punish your partner when you're mad. Is that actually going to get you what you want? Because the punishment is going to lead to retaliation. So you're going to fight. So when you're upset, do you want to fight? And for many people, the answer is yes, because that is what connection was like as in our homes, right? You fight, you have the attention, you're drained. That means you're cared about. But what does it feel like to be in these constant battles, right? What people are often looking for is to be understood and validated, but we don't know how to ask for that, right? So, and for some couples, and again, working with a lot of different relationships and people in different relationships, people will say to me like, "Am I allowed to ask that?" And it's like, why not, right? You'll be surprised as you see different kind of couple constellations, right? Every couple is their own world and you're allowed to make your world. So, you may realize, you may wake up and be like, man, I feel so insecure today. I need some compliments. And this is not to say that your partner needs to fill all your needs because they won't. And it's on us to make sure that we are filling ourselves and nourishing ourselves. And our partner's a part of that, right? So again, if your partner is open and willing, and it's a really hard day, to say, I need more affection today. Can I have more hugs? That may kind of sound silly, but you're going to get hugs. It's more likely that you're going to get hugs if you use words than if you kind of say, man, it's a hard day and I don't know. And your partner may be sitting there like, I wonder what I can do to help them. And if you actually say, like, hey, I would love these two things, they may be more than happy to do that because they want you to be happy. Your happiness is connected to their happiness. And so when we can actually sit with our feelings, right? I'm really upset. I just need you to hear me talk about how I'm upset. And again, it's not that you hate your partner, but I just need you to hold space for me. If your partner can do that, right? And to thank them for that, right? That you're building something together and building that up together, right? You may be mad and then it feels good that your partner did that. Say that, right? You might be really mad, but maybe they're holding your hand or they brought you a glass of water and you might say like, "Thank you. This feels good. I'm still mad at you, but I'm glad that you're holding my hand," or "I'm glad, you know." And so healthy couples, right? Hopefully the conflict continues to be safe, right? There's no threats, obviously no kind of physical threats, but even like I'm leaving, right? That's also, I would say that's an emotional threat as well, right? But that you can have this argument, you can have this difference, and it can be to understand each other, right? It's not about winning or losing, right? I always say, as soon as one of you loses, what happens to the relationship, right? You both lose because you're only winning, right? If you both have what you need and you're happy, right? So healthy couples can understand the unique needs of each partner, right? Maybe your partner needs 10 minutes alone in the morning. Maybe your partner needs 10 minutes alone at night. It's not one isn't better than the other. It's just what do they need and how do we love each other? Right? I already talked about the HALT, right? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Fighting is work. So if you're going to do it, pick a good time. And that also comes back down to our own regulation, right? Man, I'm so mad. But I know we can talk about this like tomorrow afternoon when we've had food and the kids are asleep or whenever all these things, right? Or after this big event. It doesn't have to be now, right? And again, healthy couples, you can trust like, okay, they're trying. They didn't mean to, right? We're gonna work on this. So even though you might be like, man, I'm disappointed, and you might say like, hey, I really want to talk about this later when we can, right? Then you can actually talk about it, right? The work isn't reactive. It's not just like, oh, how could you do this again? Ouch, that hurt.
Mhm.
Can we talk about this? Or, like, can you not do that? And then come back to it, right? But that relies on our own sense of kind of stability, again, security, right? I can handle being close and working on this. I can trust you're going to be here. You're not going to leave. And for those that come from backgrounds where they didn't have that consistency or they had to do things on their own, right? They may need their partner to verbally let them know, right? Hey, I want to talk about this, but we can do that when you're ready, right? For someone with a more attachment style. It doesn't have to be right now. It can be when you're ready. You have space, right? For someone with a more anxious style, right? You might need space or time, or you might need to regulate before you work on something like that with them. And you might tell an anxious partner, right? I'm going to take a moment, but I'm coming back,
Mhm.
right? I will come back and I'm going to talk about this with you, right? And
Exactly.
the reason I say this is there's often, the kind of cliche or very common pairing is avoidant and anxious, right? And that's another way that we see that, a balance involves both of them, right? But ideally inside of ourselves, we can both be connected, get feedback and have our space.
Mhm.
So,
And sorry, go ahead.
yeah, you can go.
Yes, and just praising the person, telling them what they're doing right so that they know, and also asking for your needs because people don't know, and respecting the other person's attachment style. If they need space, give them that space. If the avoidant partner, if you need that space, say, I'll be back. It calms the anxious attachment style person. And don't be afraid of anger because if we repress our anger, it's going to come out sideways and we're just going to lash out. Instead, what I would encourage people to do is if you're angry and say you're on your way home to work or home from work, don't come home right away. Go for a drive, go for a walk, process the anger, let the anger release. Don't be afraid of the anger. Release that anger, and even phone your wife or phone your husband. Say, you know what? I'm angry. I need some time. I'll be home. I just need to release this anger. And then when you process the anger, then you can talk.
Yeah.
Because we can say things that we regret. And that's also for parents. I have had mothers come and say, I'm lashing out at my kids and I don't want to, and it just comes out. Take that time, release that anger, and then come back.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to validate that part of being human and in relationships is having these different experiences, right? Of being close, of being understood, and also of not, right? And conflict that comes from that, right? Especially when you're put on top of that, like managing a household, parenting, all of that. And that brings up all of our deeper things as well, right? But it's okay to struggle. It's okay to have to need time and space and to need support. Right? That's the whole thing. That's what we're talking about, is that we will have these experiences and we're allowed to learn and grow. We can learn and grow from that. And there's so many avenues to do that, right? It can be in friendships, it can be in romantic relationships, it can be in communities, it can be through different healing modalities, it can be in therapy, right? There's so many places to grow, and that's part of the work. And even though we know, yeah, we have emotions, there's still so much judgment about them, right? I often say emotions are energy, right? It's something inside of you, and it's emotion. It's moving you to something, and it's important. And sometimes when the emotion is too strong, though, we can do things that help our bodies hold that in a more balanced way. So it might be, do some shakes, right? Do some shoulder rolls, right? Right? Take a deep breath, right? Part of it is knowing in your head, like, I'm okay. I can feel really upset or mad. And like, this is this energy that's telling me this is important. But oftentimes, especially when feelings could not be safely expressed in our families, there's like a mismatch. It just feels like in our bodies, it can be too much or it can feel wrong. And so that's our work to then, take that walk, have that tea, take that shower, right? Do some things, especially when there's bigger things that are coming up for you, so you can be more regulated, right? And that's going to put you in a better position to connect and work through and get what you're needing in those conversations. And so I always think about that. Again, back to the conflict question, is how do you set yourselves up well, right? If you're both morning people, then maybe the morning is a good time for you to talk through things. If you're both night owls, then maybe later in the evening, right? If the weeks are, if you have a very busy schedule during the week, it's probably not a great time to talk about such deep things. Maybe, again, find time on the weekend and invest time into it, right? Another thing is that healthy couples, like you were saying, you don't just put it off until it's too much. And especially when we come from backgrounds of where conflict is kind of pushed away or avoided or not really done well, we tend to do that too. So when we're happy, we're like, no, no, let's not talk about it. I'm happy enough. Just let's keep going. Or. But the best time to talk about hard things is when you're calm and happy and kind of more regulated, because you're going to get farther. It's harder when you're in it and it's overwhelming. Right. So that's why we always say the earlier you come to couples therapy, the better, because there's just a lot more space and room to do the work, right? And energy for that. So
Exactly.
even though it is work and you might not want to, get into it as much, you're going to be in a better setup for when it comes up again. You already have done them. You're like, oh, I know what this is for you. This is like your thing where, your mom would criticize you and it was never good enough. So then when I have feedback that comes up, but that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I want us to be able to work better together, right? Or this might be, you might be aware of like, oh, that, your dad was never present. And so when I take my space, it feels like I'm leaving. And so when you can invest in that time, you're actually setting up a good foundation for those future times when you're triggered.
And the foundation for your relationship and for your family is critical. So building those blocks,
Mhm.
building that foundation and taking your time with it. And what is the key to building a healthy relationship?
I'll go back to what we were talking about, which is one, building a healthy relationship with yourself, right? Allowing yourself the space and time that you need to understand yourself, your story, right? The more compassion you can have for yourself, the more compassion you can have for the people in your life, right? And there are a lot of women, especially people of color, you're kind of socialized to give, 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 right? So there might be wonderful caretakers that don't know how to receive, right? And even though you're a wonderful caretaker, there's still this idea of, people are gonna be grateful for me, or there's some expectation for overextending yourself, right? Or not giving yourself what you need and taking care of someone else. And when that's not met, it leads to resentment, right? So that is a indication that you're crossing your own boundaries, right? You're not taking care of yourself. You don't have what you need. So now you're resentful in this relationship. And although again, I wouldn't say it's your fault. You're not that's what you maybe how you were raised to be, what's encouraged in your culture, right? It's not your fault, but you are responsible for it, right? So when you notice that you're feeling very resentful in the relationships, it comes back down to that practice, which is, okay, what do I need? How do I listen to that? How do I honor that? Right. And that again can be a huge thing. Many of us are kind of socialized to ignore it, right? Like, oh, just keep going. You don't need to eat yet. You don't need to drink water. And the whole day has gone by and we haven't drank a glass of water or gone to the bathroom, right? So how can we have healthy relationships? It comes back down to learning to listen to yourself and your needs, because every person has unique relational needs. Some people need a lot of like social connection. Some people just need a little bit, and that's what will make them happy. And so it's finding out for you what it is, right? Finding out and learning for you what makes you feel alive, what makes you feel connected, what makes you feel grateful, right? It's finding the passions, the interests, right? And then finding people and places that foster that, right? And the communities, the relationships. And so I'd say that's what we've been talking about this whole time, which is creating room and safe spaces, healing spaces for yourself.
And
And
your
that,
inner child,
yes, yeah, yeah,
healing your inner child. When we heal our inner child, it can save marriages and it can
mhm,
save families,
yeah,
because when our inner child is hurting, it can significantly impact us and our
mhm,
relationships.
yeah, yeah. Well, when we talk about that inner child, it comes back to that part of us, right? That was in the beginning, and that's what we were talking about, right? That little baby that wanted the snack, and mom said no, right? Maybe mom said no because there was no snack. Maybe mom said no because mom was worried, oh, the baby, it's going to be too much for them, right? But those experiences that we have as a child, both of experiencing things that are deeply painful, or experiences of neglect or deprivation, not having what we needed at that time, right? Those needs continue. And so when we talk about our inner child, it's that part of us that learned how to be, right? Oh, I need to take care of everyone else, because if everyone else isn't happy, then things are not going to be safe, right? Or that part that learned, okay, I can't really get too close to people because it's not safe, right? They might take over, they might hurt me. And so as we learn what our little person inside of us needs, right, then again, we can set up our life and we can make room in our relationships for that, right? Maybe we need our partner to verbally, say something to us to help us feel connected, right? To say like, yeah, I'm not leaving, or I love you, or I'm here, or you'll have what you need, right? But these are also things that we should be saying to ourselves, right? And it's again, I think the idea of healing your inner child, right? There can be healing that happens, but I like to think of it more as taking care of our inner child, right? That part of us is going to need something, and how long is it going to need it for? Well, how often do we need to eat, right? It's more of just something that we need to experience on a consistent basis, which is what children need, which is what people need, right? It's not enough to hear from your partner one time, I love you,
Mhm.
right? I already told you I loved you, right?
Mhm.
It's more of this, again, the experience of you're loved, I'm here, I'm with you. And that can be with words or without words. But I would say our journey is about learning about these parts of ourselves and being able to have experiences that we didn't have before. And I would say that is how we heal, right? We may have had experiences where we couldn't ask for too much, whether it wasn't available or our parents couldn't give it, but now you can say, hey, I want this. I want to have that. Maybe you don't need it, right? You don't need the trip to New Zealand, but there's something in that of being able to know what you want and give it to yourself, allow yourself to have it. Right? And it can be a small thing like having morning walks, right? Having time to read poetry, right? Having a pet. But it's being aware that these things are important to us and we're allowed to have them. And so again, going back to the idea of taking care of ourselves and that it's not too needy, it's not too much, it's not weird, it's necessary, right? And just like you would do that for someone else, right, that you love,
Yes.
yeah, I'm going to plan them a party, I'm going to do that. You're allowed to do that for yourself.
And when we do that, when we can love ourselves, because that's what it is, it's loving ourselves.
Mhm.
Deeper than self-care, loving ourselves. When we can love ourselves, we're able to love others deeper and have healthier relationships. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jennifer, for joining today. For everyone watching, thank you for joining in. And please like and comment below if you have any questions. We will be leaving our information below. I do not do couples therapy at all. This is Dr. Jennifer's job. I am happy to help sit, to help process your emotions, and to hold space for you. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. And until next time, take care.